make sure that that program doesn't contain controversial subjects, and you're not impolite to people.
No, definitely not, Dad. You know me. I'm never, ever controversial or impolite.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome to Conversations with your lovable, never pisses anyone off, never been banned from Facebook or YouTube, never been sabotaged or censored for politely expressing a difference of opinion, ex-Muslim host Aina, keeping it non-controversial. This is episode 13, and I'm very happy to have my favorite religious figurehead here with me today, Lucien Greaves, co-founder and spokesperson for the Satanic Temple. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am well. So the Satanic Temple, it's been one of my favorite organizations to follow because, growing up, I was a fan of Marilyn Manson, so I'd heard of the Church of Satan and read up on it a little bit, and that never really, struck me as too interesting. But you guys are like politically active and doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and some people look at that and they ask the question, are we a political organization? Are we a prank? Are we a religion? And all these different things that aren't mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. So the answer usually is just yes.
Right, all of them.
Yeah, and it's an interesting exercise if you're to look at what the Satanic Temple is doing or our activities in general and our thought processes and compare them to other religious organizations and ask, is it really so different? Are the evangelicals today really somehow more religious than us or more honest about their beliefs in some cases just because they claim the older religion, but what really does modern evangelicalism in the United States have to do with old school Christianity?
Right. I can still see quite a few overlaps. No?
Yeah, but there was an interesting book. Krauss was the writer. I actually forget the title right now, unfortunately, but it was about how the New Deal was framed as a Christian initiative at the time. There was this drive towards charity and other activities like that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until the National Association of Manufacturers decided to sell the profit motive to the American public in the way that they so successfully have in more recent times and beginning back then in the 1940s, 50s, thereabouts. That it really started transmogrifying initially into this kind of bizarre Ayn Randian type of Christianity we have now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's really interesting. What's funny is that you guys do nothing to really antagonize or offend people actively. You're just putting yourselves out there, as having the same religious rights as other religious groups. But yet you piss off so many people.
Well, we piss them off in such a way, too, that they realize, I think, a lot of times they don't have an appropriate argument against us, so they make shit up. Mm-hmm. And when Catholic organizations call us a hate group or others take it upon themselves to kind of divine our motives beyond what we said and say we're just simply there to antagonize Christians, to insult them and that type of thing, we very strictly only go after asserting our own affirmative values.
Right. You don't tell them that their values are shit, which you easily could. But
and a lot of people, even those supporting us, seem to miss that a lot of times because we'll get messages from people advocating certain actions, like when RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, was spreading state by state like wildfire because people on the religious right were horrified about mm-hmm. homosexuals and were passing RFRA laws because they felt it defended their discriminatory policies, the baker mm-hmm. who doesn't want to bake the gay cake. And people were writing to us then, and they were saying, well, is there some way we could deny Christians business at a satanic business or whatever? It's kind of a message or whatever. we didn't really see the point in that. If you're doing business, it's just kind of stupid to turn down anybody's money.
It is, right? I've always thought that. I'd probably happily sell stuff to religious crazies. They can give me their money if they want, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, also our feeling was when we had started a petition for this in Michigan, actually, when they were trying to put forward RFRA, is that if they did want to open up businesses to discriminate on religious grounds, they should actually have to post who they're going to discriminate against on their doorway or somewhere ostentatious. It shouldn't be up to the consumer to have to go in and deal with that kind of harassment and just
absolutely.
that uncomfortable situation. But when it came to RFRA, we didn't want to mirror the tactics of the religious right either. That's not something we do. It's not this kind of tit for tat. Well, you are acting very inappropriately, so we're going to act inappropriately as well. We've done something far better with RFRA, and we're leveraging RFRA right now in a lawsuit against Missouri on reproductive rights. Missouri has these weasel bills in place that make it very difficult to get an abortion, and one of them requires that you pick up informed consent materials that puts forward a religious point of view that the fetus is a distinct human life and you're committing murder and whatever else.
Gosh.
And then you have to have these materials for 72 hours. So you have to go into the clinic, wait 72 hours, mull over these materials, and then have the procedure done. Well, we're saying that the informed consent materials contradict our own religious point of view,
which is excellent. That's amazing.
In that they're so therefore they're moot to us, and they're a violation of free exercise anyway, and so therefore the 72-hour waiting period is moot. But that's how we used RFRA, and I think that's far better and far more honest to our affirmative values than trying to match the discriminatory policies of another.
And you also provide exemptions, like from beating. Like I saw you speak on a YouTube video, and you were giving a speech somewhere, and there was a billboard about. Oh,
that billboard doesn't exist in reality. We've tried.
Real? Okay.
Yeah, that was a photoshopped image of a billboard, but we have tried to get that billboard put up, and it's amazing how difficult it is to get billboards up when you're the Satanic Temple.
Right.
Where I think recently that was found. Somebody was trying to put up a secular group in Ohio or Kentucky or what. I'm embarrassed I don't remember now because I know the guy who was doing it. But he was putting up a billboard near the theme park that has the Noah's Ark replica.
Oh, Ken Ham.
Yeah. He was putting up some billboard that was kind of in opposition to the park, the theme park.
I vaguely remember something about this.
Yeah, Genocide Park or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, from what I can see, last I saw, he still couldn't get the billboard put up. He was even offered kind of a censored version of the billboard to the billboard company, and they wouldn't put that up either. But anyways, that's not the point. The point was that we do have exemptions against corporal punishment in schools.
Yeah.
19 states still allow the school administration to beat kids.
That is shocking to me. 19 states?
Yeah.
Really?
So many others. There's kind of a carte blanche when it comes to isolation rooms. And so that can happen anywhere. So the exemption form, it states that as a Satanist, we believe our bodies are inviolable, subject to our own will alone. Right. Therefore, punitive beatings, are a violation of our religious philosophy.
I mean, just for that, it's worth it to join.
But we haven't had a plaintiff on that, and you don't want to hope for a plaintiff because that means somebody had to sign the exemption form and then take a beating from the administration in school. But believe me, that happens. We will be very fast to take that to court.
Mm-hmm. So before we kind of jumped ahead of this, I wanted to ask you firstly, what is Satanism?
Well, Satanism, for us, we view it in the metaphorical terms. And I don't know if that seems disingenuous to a lot of people. This is really the component that most people have a real difficult time grasping, that we don't believe in a literal Satan, but yet the labeling of Satanism, as they often call it, this self-identification as a Satanist isn't arbitrary to us. Seems to be the criticism we get from a lot of the atheist camp. Why can't you call it something else?
I love that you call it that, though. That is my favorite thing. I mean, I'm an atheist.
It can't be anything else. It's like, well, I've kind of thought of an analogy. If you read Milton's Paradise Lost, it would be similar to saying, well, it was a good story, but having Satan as this kind of anti-hero is just going to piss off the Christians. Could he not have used other characters? and no, obviously it wouldn't have meant as much to the reader, and it wouldn't have meant as much to Milton. This is what it is in our culture. This is the symbol of the ultimate rebellion against tyranny. One of the books that we put forward as one of the greater works of literary Satanism is Revolt of the Angels by Anatole France. And that was the whole nature of the story. It was put in this context of world history as seen through the lens of this metaphor of the war in heaven, and the churchly powers, the darkness of the medieval times were a product of that Jehovan rule. And the arts, sciences, that type of thing, those were within Satan's realm, which really seems accurate to the assumptions of both self-identified Satanists and the religious right.
You get some heat from people for calling yourselves religious atheists, right? I have to say, we've done well within atheist groups. I've spoken at a lot of atheist conferences and that kind of thing. Yeah. But I'm really infuriated by the wishy-washy self-identified atheists who really feel like, who really seem to feel like we're just ruining everything. And I'm really developing less and less a tolerance for the criticisms of the self-identified atheist camp as I am of any group. Yeah, I don't understand though. What do they think they're ruining? I don't get it.
Well, they think that because here's what I can gather from the comments I see on social media and that type of thing. If we're to be atheistic at all, which we are, we don't believe in a literal deity, and we don't embrace supernatural explanations of any type, then what we're doing is giving atheism a bad name, as though atheism should be putting on some type of unified front, which I think is a backward notion to begin with.
Oh, absolutely. There's such vast differences.
Yeah, we can't try to regulate the minutia of what atheist beliefs are. Atheism is non-belief, and let's leave it at that. And it's for the better that you do. And I mean, you don't want to try. Why try pushing your opposition into further opposition? Right. You get that kind of that's kind of the argument that pops up when you're talking about issues related to free speech or the so-called regressive left and that kind of thing. When people get so polarized that they witch hunt within their own camps, they actually have a tendency to drive people to the opposing party.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as an ex-Muslim, I get that kind of, not similar, but I get a lot of heat from fellow atheists as well, because there's the camp that is anti-immigrant, anti-migrant, and I'm of Muslim background, so some people often say that, I shouldn't be trusted to reproduce, or I should be sterilized, and obviously I'm not fond of those comments. And then there's the other camp, which is like, you're too harsh on Islam, you shouldn't criticize it. So yeah, there's a lot of that polarization that I experience.
And I think it's really deplorable when we throw the minorities within minorities under the bus.
And it happens all the time. Like, especially you notice it after a tragedy like Orlando so much. Everyone's trying to play down the Islam's role and be like, no Islamophobia, no criticism of Islam.
Well, and this is another case where you have to you have to see if it's evenly applied, and it's not. I understand people's sensitivity to American Muslims, and honestly...
Oh, yeah, I understand that too. I mean, I'm a victim of anti-Muslim bigotry often, so I get it, but denial is a whole other extreme.
Right. But would anybody be willing to say that you can't give Catholics such a hard time on raping altar boys? That's their culture. That's what they do.
Exactly.
And unless you're going to do that, don't be that extreme when it comes to Islam and pretend that Islamic doctrine actually has zero to do with Islamism. Mm-hmm. And so if you can reach that happy medium, that's a great thing. But it's a very nuanced dialogue. I mean, of course, the rednecks who are anti-gay, the Westboro Baptist Church, those types. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's other social factors. There's economic factors, I'm sure, underlying their behaviors and the adherence to their beliefs and that kind of thing. But the doctrines they're following aren't exempt from scrutiny for their role that is directly stated is being played in their activities. It's just crazy to me when you try to justify a religious point of view by saying it's completely irrelevant.
Yep, and it's really frustrating when you come from that background and you're in the thick of it and you want to be heard and you're not given a platform. Or like, I've been bumped off of radio shows in Canada once they hear I'm ex-Muslim. Before that, they want to talk to me. So,
well, yeah. And other speakers, of course, have been shut down in forums at universities and the like. Maryam Namazi, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and it's very interesting because a lot of times you will get that kind of rhetoric that you can't understand another culture's situation. That so somebody like me, a white man, presumably in a position of privilege or whatever, it just can't possibly make any commentary about this whatsoever. I have no understanding. But it's different than when an ex-Muslim comes along and has commentary that doesn't agree with the idea that no criticism should be applied. Then apparently, there's a carte blanche to shit all over you.
Oh yeah, I've been called a white supremacist so many times. But yeah, that's the way it is. Then that causes a lot of ex-Muslims who don't find allies on the left. Some of them will shift right, and then people will be upset that people are shifting right, and it's never ending.
Right. Well, and you should never abandon your values either as some kind of coddling gesture towards any problematic elements. So it's one thing that really bothers me is the way it seems currently, and maybe this is a bit paranoid on my part, but maybe it's always been this way, but it seems like there's a very horrible openness to disregarding the principle of free speech.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like with the whole Charlie Hebdo and all of that kind of thing, just they term it hate speech, call it offensive to religious groups, and that's it. It's that, and that's where you come in with your religious freedom and be like, yay, I'm protected. It's awesome.
Well, I gave a lecture at Missouri University, and nobody really pushed back. I was talking about the problem of free speech, but when it was put in the context of the Satanic Temple, the crowd there seemed to understand it. I think it would have been far more contentious if I were talking about ex-Muslims or anything of the like. But I was talking about how these current polls, there was a Pew poll that I had cited that said that some horrible percentage of millennials felt that there should be deeper restrictions upon free speech insofar as it's offensive to minority groups or whatever else, and also registered Democrats, which I feel is a horrible trend. And I was illustrating that by talking about the activities that the Satanic Temple has been involved in the way that it could be far more difficult for us when people start abusing any new restrictions on free speech. Mm-hmm. And when we were doing a presentation about the idea of the Black Mass, at Harvard one year, the Catholic groups, the archdiocese over here, was up in arms, and they took to the streets. Thousands of Catholics took to the streets, chanting and crying and casting spells, whatever the hell they do, and they were, in a way, they never did when the revelations in Boston came out that their organization had been raping their children.
Right.
But they were making the argument that what we were doing was hate speech and that type of thing. And clearly, if you put restrictions in one direction, they will work the other way too. And that's a message the Satanic Temple has been putting out. And it's not always going to work in favor of what you want. Look at RFRA. RFRA was actually put in place with the most kind of progressive intentions. The Native Americans were doing a peyote sacrament, and they were being restrained from doing so due to narcotics laws. And RFRA was put in place to say that, they had a religious right to do what they were doing. This was part of their practice. This was part of their free exercise. And it was put forward during the Clinton administration, had bipartisan support. It's only later on that you find the religious right looking to RFRA as their savior to allow them to discriminate against gays. And you have to keep these things in mind when you're trying to pass new restrictions, policies, or especially abridge free speech in any way. You have to be very careful about that kind of thing. Or pretty soon you're not able to engage in good old blasphemy or other types of things.
Well, in some of us, our existence is simply blasphemous, right? Like, especially as an ex-Muslim and apostate, my existence is offensive to so many, so offensive to so many people that they would rather that I didn't even say that I exist. So
right, and I find it hard to believe that you could ever walk away from that. Your topic could be, if you were speaking at a university, your topic could be anything at this point, and there would be people protesting against that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wrote a children's book set in Pakistan. It's an anti-homophobia book. And here in Canada, at first, it was really well embraced by schools, and people read it. And they're like, great, we can address immigrant children and Muslim children with this book, because our sex ed curriculums are recently updated to be more inclusive and more LGBT friendly. So this was, I think, a great thing to use as a resource. But then people heard about it, parents heard about it, and they were livid. They threatened school boards with lawsuits. They said that this was insensitive to Islam, that I was an Islamophobe. And my book has nothing to, it doesn't even mention religion. It's just a little boy who lives in Pakistan, his uncle and his boyfriend, and he just doesn't understand why people hate on his uncle. Right. That's it. So it's a book about love. And so they said this book was offensive to Muslims. Someone even said that it would be okay if it was like a white child and this book was set in America. It was the same book, but because it was a boy with a Muslim name and he had a gay uncle in Pakistan, this is what was causing the offense. This is what the Muslim community wrote an article, and I think it was on ISNA, Islamic Society of North America's page, and they said that the school boards were bullying the Muslim community by using this book.
Well, that makes sense. Somehow. No, in my case, I have a deep-rooted distaste for Christianity, because that's the construct I grew up in. Right. My dad's side of the family was Catholic. My mom's side was Protestant. I really despise them both for different reasons, and really not a good experience overall. I really don't like it. But just the same, I realize that other people's situation is completely different. The religion is, those religions are so ubiquitous that other people growing up had a completely different experience of it, and it's simply part of their culture. It's part of honoring their family. These are things I never had any respect for until. So
your parents were religious, though?
They weren't highly religious. I still grew to hate it, though.
Okay, yeah, same here. Mine weren't very religious, but I still hate it. People always assume you've grown up in some extra fundamentalist household and you were, a victim of religious abuse, and that's why you don't like it, but that's not always the case at all.
Well, the kind of religious abuse I would say that I may have suffered wasn't familial. It really didn't have much to do with my parents. It was really cultural. At the time of the Satanic Panic, there was this prevalent notion that Satanists were going around killing people and trying to institute.
Right, in the 80s and 90s on the talk shows.
Yeah. But I do realize that there's people whose experience of their religion is entirely different. They do embrace it for cultural reasons or whatever else, and probably a lot of those people feel like they're obligated to believe the untenable, irrational, supernatural claims that go along with that. And I think we'd be much better off if they realized that they could be cultural Christians. The Jews seem to have that figured out, but and I feel like American Muslims are probably better at that than a lot of American Christians as well, embracing it for the cultural aspects. And I think that adds to some of the confusion where people think that criticism of Islam is racist. But it shouldn't be completely one way. It shouldn't be the obligation is only on me to note that some people's experiences are different. People, no matter what they want to believe of their religion being infallible or the one true way or a better lifestyle or whatever else, should also realize that this is not the experience a lot of people have had. There's a lot of at least potential for oppression in their religious doctrines, and people have suffered in real ways. And that's another thing that kind of disgusts me about some of the people who take this coddling point of view towards the people we put criticism upon, is that they're treating them in a very they're treating them like children. Like we can't teach them anything. We can't expect anything from them. So we need to adjust our behavior accordingly. We can't broach topics that make them uncomfortable. We have to pretend that there's a uniform experience of their religion and that type of thing.
Well, yeah, the thing that frustrates me the most is the whole, it's been misinterpreted all these years. It's not homophobic, it's not sexist, it's just misinterpreted. Like I just did an episode with someone who's like a Muslim feminist, and to me that's a very frustrating position, because I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I had state-imposed, modesty. There was morality police. I saw them smack my mom's ankles with a cane for her headscarf slipping off. So then when people tell me that, when they try to whitewash the justification for these things that is in black and white in the scripture, that really, really upsets me.
Well, there's also the question, too, of whether or not there's unique features to the doctrine of Islam that makes it problematic in the question of terror right now. And that question is certainly enough to really set certain people off. And I admit I feel the same way about Islam that I feel about Scientology or any other minority religion in the United States, where despite how ridiculous it is, it makes me sick sometimes to hear the religious right talking about it as though it's so much worse
I get that.
than their ignorant point of view. However, when you get to the roots of Islam, ingrained in the doctrine was this idea of expansionism, of holy war and that type of thing. And I don't think that by design Islam is some way worse than the Christian faith. It's just incidentally, that these kind of doctrines interplay with our politics now. It's just by lucky chance, I guess, that at a certain point,
plus the level of literal adherence that it still commands, right? It's not weakened yet like Christianity.
Right. Well, at least Christianity had render unto Caesar what's Caesar and what's Caesar's, and give to God what's God's. But our current political evangelical Christians with their aspirations for dominance in a Christian nation and that type of thing. I really feel like they are not any better than the Islamists.
They're not, but they're fewer in number. So
right, and they're working within a different framework, thankfully. But if you put them in the context of the kind of strife going on in the Middle East, holy shit, you know, I think we could very easily imagine beheadings and holy war and all the rest.
Right.
So you see, there's just some kind of defect in the fundamentalist mind. It doesn't matter of what culture, but you can only hope to restrain them by better systems, better secular systems.
So I guess Christians are like caged. Christian fundamentalists are like, I think it was Michael Sherlock that said to me on Twitter once, it's like a cage. Never believe the promises of a caged lunatic.
Right.
They're only seeming softer because they're caged. So once you let them out of that cage, they'll bite
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I feel like that's quite the way it is. So you have a difficult task. Do you have a? I know I'm not interviewing you, but I'm going to anyway. Do you kind of have a vision for the future of Islam?
I do support the few honest reformists that I come across, like Majid Nawaz, when they accept the plausibility of the horrendous, violent interpretations. You know, if you deny them flat out, I don't see how you can be a reformer. There are those who are like trying to rewrite the Quran with a feminist interpretation, and they won't accept any fallibility on the Quran's part. It's perfect as it is. It's perfect for all time. Then what are you reforming? What are you changing? I mean,
well, then it's a matter of playing legalistic games to somehow make it seem like it works within the framework of modern times.
People accuse me of being a Jewish agent, anyways, I have.
I get that too.
Oh, do you?
I even got that from Ann Coulter. Ann Coulter.
Oh yeah, she's so lovely, isn't she?
Being a Jew, yeah. And if I'm not, sometimes I'm accused of being anti-Semitic, even all the while I'm being accused of being a Jewish agent of some kind. Whatever,
I mean, you can get it all the same day for the same thing that you do. You can be anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, Jewish agent, secret Islamist. I get crazy social justice feminist and an MRA. I've gotten those in the same day.
Right.
But yeah, good times. So
yeah, you can be everything at once to everybody.
Yeah. So going back to the Satanic Panic. So you were interested in Satanism for a long time, I guess?
Yeah, but it really started when I was a kid, and the talk show hosts would get on talking about what Satanists were doing just behind the scenes of.
Did you identify as a Satanist, as a teenager too, or?
No, it was presented as this horrific thing. They were supposed to be murdering babies and animals.
Right, I remember that.
So no, obviously nobody wanted any part of that, but it did pique my curiosity as to how this could be, and how there could be such a prevalent movement that has been so effective at not getting caught. Obviously, at a certain time, by high school even, it was obvious that so much of this was complete bullshit. But later on, it kind of came back to me when I was getting out of high school or whatever. I really started wondering how did this happen? I started remembering the really irrational claims I was hearing about Satanism. And it just really struck me as odd, because you had, you did have at least one above ground self-identified satanic organization, and yet you had it being presented as though it were nothing but criminal and murderous. And how could that be? So I started reading more about it and started meeting with people who were self-identified Satanists, reading the literature and that kind of thing. And this all kind of comes together with my growing distaste for mainstream organized religions as well. Getting this kind of idea that everything I was taught was a lie, and that everything was misrepresented, and the wrong people were maligned. And I really grew an affinity for the satanic and never really turned back since.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting story, that these shows that were meant to terrify you kind of had the opposite effect, right?
Yeah, it is funny to see that this kind of artistic raw material of Satanism was thrown out into our culture to scare us and to drive home this message that you have to embrace Jesus as the savior of your soul, or this is the alternative. It's meant as a tool to bludgeon you. Yeah. And if you use it and repurpose it towards constructive ends and embrace it, well, then you're being told that you have no right to do so, that this is somehow their material and you're not interpreting it correctly. To self-identify as a Satanist is somehow hateful against the mainstream.
I think it's a really polite and kind way to put the hypocrisies in light, you know? Like, it has a trolling element to it. Would you deny that, or?
It depends on what you mean. I mean, I think when people call us trolls, sometimes they're suggesting that we like to get attention for attention's sake. And nothing could be further.
No, I say it in a very positive way. Like, I love that you troll religious people, but continue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, we love bringing attention to the issues. Myself, I can't stand attention for its own sake, and I think that's very transparent when people do that. And I think a lot of causes are ruined by people trying to build themselves into central characters and media figures and that type of thing. In the most deplorable way. People seem to get struck with a real sickness once they get any media attention or whatever else. But of course, I'm delighted though when we bring attention to how we're fighting the reproductive rights campaign.
Oh, you've done such amazing things. Even you had a satanic coloring book that you guys gave out. Did you ever get to give it out in a school, or?
Actually, yes. And in Colorado, this came by, and I bet by next year they'll shut down the open forum, but they were giving out Bibles in Colorado, and working with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, there was a table set up, and the Satanic activity book and other non-religious materials were being distributed, maybe some other alternative religions as well. And so it was actually an open forum. But in Florida, they just shut down the open forum entirely. After 3 years of debates and arguments with secular groups who were telling them it wasn't appropriate to hand out Bibles and Christian literature, the Satanic Temple comes along, and suddenly they have an epiphany that this isn't, that maybe religious teaching should be left to the house or
it's personal. So beautiful. I love it. Yeah, you guys are genius. I just love it so much. The way you do that. And there was also like a thing with prayer in public office, and then you guys did satanic incantations.
Well, we have a couple lawsuits coming up in Arizona and Phoenix. They shut down they moved to a moment of silence policy only long enough to block us from giving an invocation, and then reinstated their invocations and said that only, approved chaplains or whatever could deliver the invocations. So obviously it was discriminatory. The council members didn't try to hide this either. We have a whole list of comments they made where they were specifically saying that they were doing what they were doing to block the Satanic Temple.
So you never got to do your invocations ever?
No, but I think we will. But I think it's all well and good, because we'll set a legal precedent coming up, and it seems like to me it'll be a pretty easy case going forward. But another issue I'm trying to raise awareness about is the ongoing problem of the satanic panic. A lot of people don't realize that it never quite ended, this persecution based on this idea of Satanism. And it's not just some obscure issue that only affects somebody who may or may not need to self-identify as a Satanist at all. A lot of the people who were affected in the 80s and 90s had no had no connection to any satanic philosophy or any interest in self-identifying as Satanists. It was just a witch hunt in which people could be accused of being a certain type of Satanist that was completely imaginary, and their families destroyed, their lives ruined, possible prison sentences. But a lot of what happened there was similar to the alien abduction phenomena of around the same time. People were going to therapists who would use regression, hypnotic regression, and other memory retrieval tactics, which are proven ineffective and entirely debunked as useful. And they were coming up with these false memory narratives of satanic abuse and that type of thing. And despite falling out of mainstream favor, this idea of satanic cults, ritual abuse, and that type of thing, the therapeutic fringe hasn't changed, and a lot of the same practitioners are doing the same thing.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And we recently posted a petition against a particular therapist, Neil Brick. He's a licensed therapist in Massachusetts, and he runs these conferences. And he has an annual one in Connecticut for an organization called SMART, a tortured acronym that's supposed to stand for Stop Mind Control and Ritual Abuse Today. And we recently had a couple of observers at a conference he put together for an organization called Survivorship. He's the president of Survivorship. And you can see the report that we put together. If you check our social media, it's there. And there's an article on Pathos. And we had a video that we took of the organizer, Neil Brick, in stating this paranoid prohibition against people touching their faces at the conference, because he felt that people touching their faces could signal a type of triggering to people who have been instilled with mind control. So if somebody's been mind controlled by the government, somebody touching their face could trigger that.
Wow,
now,
this is some real tinfoil crazy stuff.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I went to one of the SMART conferences, and they were actually selling hats that had a steel mesh lined inside. I shit you not. And it was supposed to block those kinds of transmissions. I don't know, mind control transmissions or whatever else. So you really are talking the lunatic fringe. But the horrifying part is that they are licensed. These people are you have people who are licensed in the mental health profession.
That's scary.
Selling these delusional claims to the mentally vulnerable. And that's really what we're fighting against. In the first petition we put out against a clinical psychologist in California, she's part of this whole network and is an associate of this Neil Brick guy. She was consulting with a woman in New York, a multimillionaire mother, who ended up killing her own 8-year-old kid because she felt that was the only way to preserve this kid from being tortured by this unseen satanic cult for the rest of the time. She felt she was preserving him from these tortures. So the mother goes away to prison, but obviously the big question to us was, what role did this clinical psychologist play? Because you look at her website, it's full of satanic panic, Illuminati bullshit. It talks about witchcraft abuse and these other things. So you had this disturbed woman who went to a disturbed psychologist, and then she ends up killing her 8-year-old kid to preserve him from some non-existent satanic threat. And we feel it's really time to open investigation against this psychologist for her possible role in this. And even if they're going to claim, well, that's client privilege and those records aren't privy or whatever, I think just based on the beliefs that this woman puts forward, they're so outside the norm. They're so debunked, disproven, and self-evidently delusional that she shouldn't have her license to practice. And this is a very difficult issue to bring attention to, because it's easy when you can put together a press release that says the Satanic Temple is seeking to put activity books in a public school or whatever. That's known clickbait, and there's going to be a lot of stories about that. When it's a story as complicated as this, and that we're fighting the ongoing satanic panic, and that by the very nature of what we're doing, we're naming names, and we're getting into territory where there might be legal issues later on, and a journalist is going to have to put more than the standard bit of time into hacking out what they're doing and do some fact checking or whatever. it's very difficult to draw attention to the issue, but we're starting to now.
That's great. I mean, you guys had a documentary on CNN too, so hopefully that brought you guys some attention.
Yeah, and that should be airing on Netflix anytime now. Vice is putting out a short documentary about us, and they're interested in doing a series of little documentaries about us that cover different issues. And thankfully, they want to do one about this issue of the ongoing satanic panic.
That's fantastic. I think that's a good cause. I mean, I can personally relate to it a little bit. I mean, no one's ever tried to imprison me or something like that, but I wore a lot of black. I was like a goth kid, right? Like at some points pretty extreme in my life. And coming from Saudi Arabia, it's not a very common look. Like we do all have to wear black cloaks, but this is slightly different. So I had a lot of relatives that would speculate that I'm some kind of witch, or not my parents, but other relatives. And I'd always hear whispers about how I'm a witch, how I'm a devil worshiper, how I drink blood. So there was some of that in my life.
Right, exactly. And that's part of being the self-identified Satanist.
I wasn't even a but yeah, just from wearing a lot of black and dyeing my hair.
But it doesn't matter because it doesn't stop. People will call you a Satanist then. People will say that the music you like is satanic, or that your lack of faith. It all merges into one characteristic of the Satanist, and you can either embrace that or not. But if we were to follow the advice of some of these very lukewarm so-called activists and just call ourselves something else, what else do you concede then? Do you not dress how you want to dress? Do you not put on that music anywhere somebody might be within earshot of it because you might just offend their sensibilities that it could be satanic or whatever else?
Yeah, there's a power in reclaiming that, right?
Yes, there definitely is, and there's certainly a lot to be ashamed of if you refuse to do that, if you refuse to stand up for who you are, or completely completely model yourself based on what you think the appropriate terms are for something. I mean, in this case too, when I find the old religious constructs to be so counterproductive, I have no real interest in preserving this idea that they are the arbiters of proper moral behavior. And I feel like that's what you do when you concede this idea of Satanism to them. Mm-hmm. It's not so much that they want to uphold that Satanism is evil. They're doing that in direct opposition to their own point of view. So they're putting forward this notion that they still have, that they have developed Western values, that they have always been on the right side of moral issues. And in another 20 years, maybe not even, you'll hear all this talk about how if the propaganda works as it traditionally has, you'll hear all these claims about how it was really the churches that brought gay rights into prominence.
Oh, I hear that stuff. Yes.
Well, you hear that shit about slavery, and it couldn't be more wrong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I heard someone say that it was a religion that was all about sexual liberation and women's freedoms, and I mean, these concepts are in no way borrowed from religion. It's just such vague bullshit that you can try to twist
the revisionism goes way back, too. They'll claim the Enlightenment was actually a product of Christian doctrine, and that scientific advances, and of course, capitalism now is sold as this Christian ideal, and none of that. There's no truth to any of that. It's all these bullshit massaged facts that have, it's this square peg being fit into the round hole. But that it seems to work. I can't.
Oh, it works on so many people because, I mean, I think we live in a theist majority world of people who subscribe to organized religion who see the world changing around them, and they're desperate to not let their beliefs unravel at the same time. So they will cling to anything that will help them believe that this still works.
Well, on a smaller scale, you see that with with Donald Trump being given the nomination. And some people are surprised that the religious right seems to be lining up and saying, well, yeah, this is our guy. This was always our guy. But that's what they'll do, of course, just in the same way they'll claim that the current values in a lot of ways are their own and they authored them when there's no turning back.
Right. And Trump's not religious, or, isn't he like a serial adulterer? And
yeah, but once you have that monopoly, you're not going to give it up. I don't see the religious right saying, well, we lost the Republican Party, sorry. They're going to try to cut their losses and say, like, no, this was part of our plan all along.
Such a good analogy. That's exactly how religious people work on a larger scale. So how many members do you have? Do you know that number offhand?
Around 40,000, I think.
That's awesome.
Well, it must be mentioned we let people just sign up online.
Well, of course.
But why wouldn't we? I think why would we put a high burden of proof upon the people who self-identify with us? That would be putting us also at a disadvantage to the more traditional religions where you are if you say you are. And then those numbers are reflected in Pew polls and everything else. We don't go out and try to recruit. We're not too terribly concerned with numbers. We know it means something when it comes to political movements overall and in general. But yeah, no, I think that's the best way to do it. People can sign up and then they can identify with us. They don't necessarily need to buy a membership card or a certificate or whatever.
Oh, you can just sign up for free?
Yeah.
You don't need to get a membership card?
We sell the membership cards.
Yeah, I saw that.
But you shouldn't have to pay to be a member.
Great. I think that's great. Yeah. And you can just go to thesatanictemple.com and sign up.
Yeah.
Great. So if anyone listening wants to sign up, go do it.
And feel free also to sign our petition against this mental health care malpractice.
Yeah, for sure. You guys do a lot of really good work. You focus a lot on Christians, right? How can you expand it to troll other religions? I don't want to use the word troll, but maybe you can put that better for me.
Our activism. And we get some of that bullshit too, where people are complaining, well, we won't see you say anything against the Muslims or whatever, and then getting all hot and bothered and pissed off or whatever. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, if Muslims were pushing Islamic doctrine in public schools anywhere where we're relevant, it would be the same reply. We would still offer a counter voice. So, we're put in opposition to the Christian religious right here all the time, because that's what there is. That's simply what's going on in the United States.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's.
Have you had any requests to have chapters outside of the U.S.?
Yeah, and actually, some of these people I've just worked to talk out of it, because I felt like the situation was such where they would really be putting themselves in legitimate danger.
Like in the Middle East or something?
Well, like in Peru.
Yeah,
even. And then there was a guy recently who was wearing a Satanic Temple T-shirt on Turkish TV, which I thought was not something to be taken lightly by any means either. We have a chapter in Italy. We have one, of course, starting in the UK, and that one seems like it'll have a lot of action. And we do have a lot of international requests pending. But we want to talk with everybody in other countries and make sure that they have the support they'll need, and that their situation is such that it's a good idea.
Well, I hope and pray to see the Saudi and Pakistani chapter someday.
I mean, it's not as though we don't get death threats here.
No, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but the state is not on the side of those death threats.
Right,
so
exactly.
It's a tiny bit better, I guess. But yeah, no, I can imagine. Do you ever feel like unsafe because your face is out there? Like I stay anonymous because of the amount of death and rape threats that I get. So, I mean, you're obviously much braver than I am. But do you feel unsafe?
I did at first, and when I did some early speaking arrangements where I would go into the Bible Belt territory to speak and realize that it was open to the public and that threats had come, I would feel like it was just crazy what I was doing.
Yeah.
My mood can shift day to day too.
How's your family with, like, are they cool with the Satanic Temple?
Oh yeah, they're fine.
That's good. That's good. Because you mentioned
they've had to reconcile themselves to it. They've done a pretty good job. Mm-hmm. Nobody's really giving me a hard time there. But nobody's assaulted me yet.
That's good. That's
yeah.
Excellent. And let's hope that it never happens.
Well, one thing that really pisses me off is Facebook. I get death threats on Facebook. People will post threats against the Satanic Temple, calling for us to be beaten, murdered, our monument to be destroyed, shot, smashed, bombed, whatever else. And there hasn't been a single time I've reported that kind of behavior on Facebook that they haven't found that it didn't violate their
yes.
standard.
I'm so glad you brought this up because, they've kicked me off of Facebook twice for offending people. So
right.
being an ex-Muslim, I've been banned from YouTube for this very podcast where I haven't really had any more controversial conversations than this one. But it was banned from YouTube twice and Facebook twice also because they have this real name policy, which maybe you also have suffered under. I don't know what name you go by on Facebook, but they insist that you use your real name, which I don't for obvious reasons. I don't want to die. Then they take away your Facebook account and they demand you show them government ID.
Right. Well, I have a fan page, so you're allowed to use whatever.
I had a fan page too because I did that later, and someone still got it taken down because that's the only thing they can report me for is the pseudonym.
Oh, that's weird because my understanding of the fan page was that you were allowed to use your pseudonym on the fan page. But if you need to get it out of your system, if you need to really rage on Facebook, just know you can send the Satanic Temple any death threat you want, and Facebook does not give a shit.
Yeah. Or ex-Muslims, like you can send them rape threats and you can be ISIS recruiting people and they thrive on Facebook, but people like us will suffer on Facebook. Either we'll get taken down or people who threaten us won't get taken down.
Yeah, I really hope to see the day that Facebook is overtaken by some better, more secure, as far as personal information goes, social
Facebook
media platform.
Actively hostile towards privacy. They want your information. I mean, I hate Facebook for so many reasons. To the point where
they've gone through great efforts to make it difficult to use Facebook on your mobile phone without that
messenger app. Yes.
Yeah, right.
I hate them
which
so
of course
much.
is just phone access for them.
Yeah, I never downloaded it. Did you?
No.
Good.
No. But I don't really read my messages on Facebook either, so it doesn't really.
Well, I'm glad I got to you on Twitter.
Yes. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I don't often say that to religious people, but.
Well, anytime. We're a young organization and it's grown really fast, and we're doing everything we can to put. And we generally have no budget either, and that's another thing. We crowdfund a lot of time for individual projects. We have our reproductive rights fund, and all of it and more goes towards its intended projects. Believe me, but now we've put together a very dedicated council, and we're starting to look at doing things on more of a nationwide scale. So we have some projects coming up that will, I think, really kind of help redefine the religious liberty dialogue in the United States. One side has grown grown sick with the monopoly they've had. And you still have this prevalent notion, despite the things we've done, that religious liberty only benefits one side of the argument. And I think we have some things coming up now that are of a sufficient scale that it will cause people to think differently of this hereafter.
I cannot wait. I mean, you guys did this pink mass with Fred Phelps' mother.
Yeah. What's funny is the aftermath of that was a very kind of theatrical thing, and really my first introduction into the press. People started recognizing me by the pictures from the pink mass and that kind of thing. And
you had this great headpiece on with the horns.
Yes. Well, of course, the most controversial part of that is that at the culmination of this little ritual event in the cemetery, and what this was, for anybody who doesn't know, is that the Westboro Baptist Church was going to protest the funerals of the Boston Marathon bombing victims. And me and the person I co-founded the Satanic Temple with were in Boston at the time, and we were going to join the counter-protesters to see the Westboro Baptist Church come at this time. And, at a real horrible time to come to Boston and kind of flaunt your anti-homosexual agenda and just plain ignorance at the funerals of these victims. So we go there, and there's a massive turnout. And I think the Westboro Baptist Church had to know that there was a real potential for things to get ugly in this situation. And they didn't show up. They opted out of that one, probably best for them. But they tweeted these images where they superimpose themselves over the crowd, holding their signs that, God brought AIDS or whatever, or God brought the bombs and all that. And they said, "We were with you in spirit," this kind of mocking tweet or whatever. So we were considering ways in which we could maybe meet the Westboro Baptist Church on similar spiritual terms. So Fred Phelps was alive at the time. Thankfully, he's dead now. But we looked up and found that his mother's grave was in this obscure, large cemetery in Mississippi. So we went over there to do these homoerotic satanic rituals over her grave.
Oh, I mean, I feel so bad laughing about things being done over someone's grave, but this is...
this is the Westboro Baptist.
Yeah, I know, right? It's the Westboro. I feel so conflicted, but no, it's hilarious what you did.
I got some of that criticism. People were saying, "What if somebody did that over your mother's grave?" And that's similar to asking, well, what if somebody imposed a punishment of capital punishment on you? It's like, well, why would somebody do that? It's right. Like, you can't just look at Ted Bundy getting the electric chair and saying, well, what if your mother got the electric chair? It's like, well, my mother wasn't a serial killer.
That's a great point.
There's a certain difference there. But in any case, we did these homoerotic rituals over the grave of his mother. And then at the end, So
you had people making out, right? Over his grave. Yeah. That's so brilliant.
Yeah, it seemed very tame to me, and I respectfully placed my testicles on her grave at the kind of culmination of the event. Lovely. And that, of course, caused the most controversy because images of that were released as well.
Oh, my gosh.
And we declared her a lesbian in the afterlife, but I also made clear to the media that we didn't believe in that supernatural shit anyways, so that the real message was that we believed that due to the Westboro Baptist Church's beliefs that they were obligated to believe that she was lesbian in the afterlife. And the Westboro Baptist Church
I love it.
Yeah, the Westboro Baptist Church has made this argument that belief is inviolable and they can believe what they want. And so we extended that to our belief being inviolable about what we believe about what they believe. And we felt that they believed that she was a lesbian in the afterlife despite anything else they might say. Our belief and their belief was inviolable. Oh. So that was the whole message there. And people since have asked if I regret doing that because now they see these more highbrow campaigns, these real well-defined legal arguments and that type of thing. But no, not at all. I think that was great. I think as far as ritual goes, the pink mass was everything a ritual should be, and actually had some kind of effect in the real world. And naturally, the Westboro Baptist Church had very public fits about what had happened, and they graced us with one of their famous flyers saying that Satanists, homosexuals, and whoever else, we're all one and the same. We're all going to burn in hell and all that kind of thing.
Well, you made it onto one of their flyers. I hope you framed that.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
No, what you guys do is amazing, and I can't believe that you get heat from so many different kinds of groups of people, including atheists who think you're ruining everything. Fuck them all. Keep doing what you're doing. You know, I get like this weird like envy, right, of people who are like, even you guys have a lot of like the mainstream media, like John Oliver, Samantha Bee, Jon Stewart. They'll all make fun of conservative Christianity, like right on TV.
Right.
And I'm just like, when are we going to get that for us? Like, I'll cheer for you, absolutely. But I'm also like, I want it too. Right,
exactly. Well, it's important. It's something, you need. You need that kind of criticism. You need that kind of counterbalance. And, as I said, it was really with the Danish cartoons that I really got disgusted with some of the reaction. I never forgave the magazine The Nation for its reply to the Danish cartoon controversy, when they were kind of trying so hard to not throw away their values and their adherence to free speech principles, but it was just impossible, to the point where they were just writing these nonsensical statements, criticizing the publication that put out the Muhammad cartoons by saying, you would never find that same publication printing any similar cartoon disparaging or mocking Jesus. And I thought, well, that's not the point. And they shouldn't be obligated to do that either. They're a publication of a certain market. Mm-hmm. I mean, it might be a deplorable publication. You might disagree with everything it says. It might be infuriating when you see it.
But they do it to the publications that are equal offenders of all religions, like Charlie Hebdo. They call them racist.
That's a good point. But even if they didn't, we shouldn't concede that. We shouldn't say, well, you can't publish this kind of thing. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed a Canadian journalist from one of the biggest papers here. And he had written on the death anniversary of Charlie Hebdo this article that was really quite offensive to me as an illustrator and an ex-Muslim, saying they were like snickering clowns, racists, like on their death anniversary. This is what he has to say. And I'm like, after they've been pumped with bullets, man, this is really awful. And he's, a liberal guy, so I don't know what this weird reflex is. So I had a chat with him, and I can send you the link to that conversation, but he had clearly never thought about someone in my position before. And you can see that.
A lot of people haven't, and a lot of people like to ignore that there's people in your position, or I don't think a lot of the people shouting down Maryam Namazi or Ayaan Hirsi Ali have a very significant grasp of what they're saying or doing or what their backgrounds are either. Mm-hmm. And that's a real sad thing to me.
It's been such a pleasure talking to you. And,
it's been a pleasure talking to you as well.
Good luck to you guys.
Let your ex-Muslim comrades know that if it's something they're interested in identifying in, they certainly have a place in the Satanic Temple.
Thank you. Thank you for being so welcoming towards all. You can follow Lucien at
Lucien Greaves.
That's LucienGreaves.
Correct. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of Polite Conversations. You can support this podcast by sharing the shit out of it, making some noise about it, or contributing via Patreon. Patreon.com/nicemangoes. No E in mangoes. Also, you can follow me on Twitter @nicemangoes. If you want to make a one-time donation instead of a monthly Patreon one, you can do so via PayPal, nicemangoes.blog@gmail.com. Remember, no E in mangoes. If you've got an interesting story and would potentially like to be a guest, you can email me there too. A special thanks to Dylan Beck for theme music, sound, and production help.